We don't have much time left because we want to give people a chance to go and look at the book and buy the book, and there's also things to eat and drink through there. And we have a lot of questions here, and thank you so much for all the questions from the audience. I just want to choose two clusters and basically action items, because there's a bunch of questions relating to two action items that we might think further about. And one of them is the next international flotilla heading to Gaza in May. There's going to be a U.S. ship called the Audacity of Hope. And several people in the audience wanted to know if our panelists would consider sailing on the boat, and if not, what they think if they could project a scenario for what's going to happen when the Audacity of Hope sails out of international waters into the Israeli domain. And the second action item is really around the BDS movement, which we've heard a little bit about the effectiveness of. People are wondering if the panelists can say just a little about both the validity and the effectiveness of the BDS movement in a particularly diagnostic way. And I'll ask you to be fairly brief because we really only have about 10 minutes, and then we're going to break and go into the other room. So, Moustafa, do you want to?
Sure. For one thing though, just a slight correction, because the attack on the Mavi Marmara was actually in international waters, so that wasn't in Israeli waters. That was in international waters. So I think it's important.
Same thing, as long as the U.S. supports it in Israeli waters.
Yeah. We have an essay by Omar Barghouti in the book about the BDS movement, who's one of the founders of the movement. And so if people want more information than what's being presented today, then I think it's a good place to go. I think that the BDS movement is part of the growing nonviolent participatory actions around the state of around the Palestinian issue to get Palestinian rights secured. So I think it should be recognized also as such. I think that it's being actively opposed by the state of Israel. In fact, I believe that they're voting on a law recently to, it's today, right? Yeah.
It just passed the first reading, a bill to criminalize citizens of Israel who call for a boycott of Israel. It would mandate, I think, a 2-year prison sentence, and they can be sued by anyone who feels that their business is threatened. That means if you call for a boycott in the comments section of a Haaretz article, a settler can sue you and take you to court. It's a psychotic law. But it's only passed the first reading. It hasn't gone through the 3 readings it needs, and it would have to, I think, withstand high court scrutiny, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously, I mean, the activists inside Israel who are calling for boycott, and this group is growing. It's starting to encompass the entire radical left, which is about 700 people, are getting behind it because they understand that it's ethical and it's working. And they're doing so under threat of imprisonment, and many of them have already been visited by the Shin Bet. Their homes have been raided, or they're called for meetings, like Chinese activists are called for to have tea with the internal security services. So this is already happening.
And there's a way actually to relate that to the Audacity of Hope, because and to the U.S. situation. If one considers the fact that there have been all of these FBI raids and subpoenas on pro-Palestinian activists over the last few months in the United States, which perplexes many people in the community, frankly, because they have no idea what is the FBI looking for. But these grand jury summons have been given, and many people believe that it's just an attempt to intimidate and put fear into the Palestinian activist community in particular. And then, of course, you have the case of the 11 students at UC Irvine who spoke, disrupting a speech by Michael Oren, the ambassador, and then were subsequently disciplined by their university. And then just recently, a year after that event, the district attorney from Irvine has now laid misdemeanor criminal charges against them on conspiracy. which really just is kind of mind-boggling in a state, in a country that talks so much about the freedom of expression and the First Amendment.
Well, let me add something about this raid on the Palestinian activists. That's very serious, and it's not just that case. This is the first action taken by the FBI under a new Supreme Court ruling, which was pushed through by President Obama. He's the one who pushed it through. It was argued by Kagan, his new Supreme Court justice, and they won with the support of the far-right justices. It's the worst attack on freedom of speech since the Smith Act in 1941. It criminalizes action, including speech, which the government claims provides support for organizations on the terrorist list. Now, first of all, the terrorist list has absolutely no justification whatsoever. It's an arbitrary list put together by the government, no review, no evidence. They can put anybody they want on it. Like Ronald Reagan, for example, took Saddam Hussein off it because he wanted to provide him with aid and put Cuba in instead. They do anything they want. The terrorist list is a scandal, and Obama's making it worse by now saying that any kind of support, and that can be speech. In fact, in the case in question, particular case in question was a case of a legal aid group which was advising the Turkish PKK, which is on the terrorist list, giving them legal advice and advising them on pursuing nonviolent action. Right. That's giving them material support, and that's now criminal. It's a very far-reaching attack on freedom of speech and other freedom of action, and these raids are the first case in which the FBI is following those principles. That's really dangerous. We keep our eye on it. Well, okay, let me just, there are other things to say, but I don't want to take too much time. Yeah.
Susan?
Well, I just want to push, because I do think that the terrain has changed. I do think that progressive forces just can't say, either you're pro-Israel or against, and it's all about what happened during the Holocaust. I think this is absolutely a new generation, and I don't think younger people, no matter what their parents thought, feel the same way. I'm quite convinced that it's different. And I also want to say that these demonstrations in Egypt were very clearly examples of nonviolent resistance, as was the Midnight of Malvery. And if I were going to do a history of this as a kind of political legacy, I would talk about that. I would say, Gandhi, I would then go to Martin Luther King, I would then go to Midnight on the Mavi Marmara, I would go then to Tahrir Square. I mean, these are times when people, nonviolent resistance is resistance. It's standing there in the glare of a global public camera, right, where you are daring the other side to be violent. That's very different from pacifism or just being peaceful, right, or kind of liberal, let's all have our opinion. It's a very strong stand. And so, to be on this boat was precisely that kind of challenge. It was not, they were not the victims. They did something extremely powerful politically, and it's dangerous. It's scary. You can lose your life. But the nonviolent kind of politics, which can be effective when there's a global public sphere, when there's a new kind of technology that allows that to be visible, right? That is enormously powerful, and it calls for the need for solidarity. And here I just want to say one disappointment. I wasn't in the country when there was a solidarity march in Times Square, but I hear it was rather small. But I did go to the first one that was called for solidarity for the Egyptian uprising opposite the UN, and I was disappointed that the people there were all, quote, Egyptians. You know, they were organized as Egyptians. Where is the left solidarity there? Because I don't think it's only about worrying about our government. I really think it's saying, look, the game has changed. We're going to see our solidarities differently than we did before, because it seems to me that there's a kind of irrelevance about the whole staging of the Middle East crisis. It had traction when I was young, and when there was no doubt about it, the worst thing that I had ever heard about or saw on a TV set was Auschwitz. That was the worst human thing I had seen. And it was horrible. But it is not the excuse for today. And quite frankly, that generation is not anymore the generation that we're dealing with. And that distinction of generations, I think, has to be taken very seriously, and the politics has to shift because of it. So we're looking at South Africa now as leading us in how to do politics. We're looking at a whole set of movements that are not derivative of something in the West. They're absolutely at the forefront. But I wish there'd be more support on the streets of New York, because it's not just to be against Obama, but it's to be for something.
Yeah,
Sorry, Max.
oh, you want to
Very
do another
quick.
question?
Very quick.
Oh, yeah, I don't know how quick it would be.
Because we have to really have to. I think we have to wind up, because there's still a part of the evening that has to be executed next door. But I think this is a good point to end. We got the benefit of panelists' wonderful comments this evening. I wanted to ask you all to join with me in thanking everyone who's been involved.